A heartbreaking goodbye in Israel after the deaths of 6 hostages in Gaza.
Those beautiful 6 survived together, and those beautiful 6 died together. And now they will be remembered together forever.
Hundreds of thousands of protesters calling on the Israeli prime minister to make an immediate hostage deal with Hamas, as President Biden says Netanyahu needs to do more.
We're not giving up. We're going to continue to push as hard as we can.
The CBS Evening News starts now. Good evening. I'm Nancy Cordes in for Nora O'Donnell. Palpable anger and anguish pouring onto Israeli streets today as throngs of protesters marched for a ceasefire deal that would release the remaining October 7th hostages. The day started with a nationwide strike that nearly brought the country to a standstill, followed by funerals for some of the 6 hostages whose bodies were returned home after they were found shot in the back of the head in a Gaza tunnel over the weekend. Among the dead, 23-year-old Israeli-American Hersh Goldberg Polin. President Biden was asked today about the job that Israel's leader is doing, and his answer was terse.
Do you think it's time for Prime Minister Netanyahu to do more on this issue? Do you think he's doing enough?
No.
We have team coverage from Israel to the White House tonight. Let's start with CBS's Imtiaz Tayeb, who is in Tel Aviv. Imtiaz?
Nancy, good evening. The national strike saw Israel's main airport shut and its economy grind to a virtual halt for hours, as public anger also exploded into a second night of street protests following the killings of 6 hostages in Gaza, including Israeli-American Hersh Goldberg Polin.
Thousands gathered at a Jerusalem cemetery to say their last goodbyes to Berkeley-born Israeli-American Hersh Goldberg Polin, including the 23-year-old's parents, Rachel and John.
Hersh, we failed you. We all failed you.
The Goldberg Polins are among the most high-profile hostage families who took the plight of those held by Hamas to the global stage, including the Democratic Party convention.
Okay, sweet boy, go now on your journey. I hope it's as good as the trips you dreamed about, because finally, my sweet boy, finally, you're free.
Hersh Goldberg Polin's body was found in a Gaza tunnel alongside the remains of Ori Danino, Alex Lobanov, Almog Sarusi, Carmel Gat, and Eden Yerushalmi. According to initial autopsy reports, all were shot in the head between 48 and 72 hours before they were found by Israeli soldiers. Their killings have triggered a second night of furious protests as thousands of Israelis continue to demand Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agree to a ceasefire and hostage release deal with Hamas.
The fury here is on a scale not seen before, with protesters blaming the killings of the 6 hostages squarely on Netanyahu.
My government is the people who are supposed to keep us safe. They just don't do their jobs.
In an address to the nation, Netanyahu appealed for forgiveness for not bringing the 6 hostages back alive and said Hamas will, quote, pay a heavy price. The protesters accuse him of stalling for months now the U.S. brokered ceasefire and hostage release talks for his own political gain. And until an agreement is reached, the violence in Gaza rages on. Over the past 24 hours, 48 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes, according to health officials. Even as the UN attempts to vaccinate 640,000 Palestinian children in the hopes of preventing a major outbreak of polio in the devastated territory.
Now, based on the framework of a multi-phase deal Israel and Hamas agreed to back in July, 3 of the 6 hostages who were killed would have been released as part of the first phase of any eventual ceasefire agreement. And Hersh Goldberg Polin would have been one of them. Nancy.
So close to freedom. Imtiaz Tayeb in Tel Aviv, thank you so much. Here in Washington, President Biden returned from vacation this morning and almost immediately went into a meeting on the hostage crisis to discuss what to do next. CBS's Scott MacFarlane is at the White House tonight and joins me now. Good evening, Scott.
And Nancy, the president, Vice President Harris, and the hostage deal negotiating team met in the White House Situation Room today to talk about how to aid these efforts to bring about a ceasefire deal and the release of the hostages. In a statement, the president referenced the murders of those hostages over the weekend, saying, "We are devastated and outraged, and make no mistake, Hamas leaders will pay for these crimes." We also discussed next steps in the ongoing effort to secure the release of the hostages and to bring them home, Nancy.
But Scott, has there been any movement in the ceasefire talks in the last 48 hours?
Well, there's been a ceasefire proposal on the table, and outside the White House today, when the president spoke with us, he tried to express some optimism about its prospects.
What makes you think that this deal will be successful in a way that the other deals were not?
Hope springs eternal.
The vice president also issued a statement today condemning Hamas and adding it is long past time for a ceasefire and hostage deal. Nancy?
Now, the president's been saying he's hopeful for months with no real movement. All right, Scott MacFarlane at the White House, thank you. The president and vice president went from the Situation Room to the campaign trail today, stumping with blue-collar union workers in their first joint campaign appearance since President Biden's historic decision to drop out of the race. CBS's Ed O'Keefe is on the trail tonight in Battleground, Pennsylvania.
Out on the campaign trail today, President Biden and Vice President Harris for the first time since she became the Democratic Party nominee.
Kamala and I are damn proud that we protected the pensions of over 1 million workers.
Their joint appearance capped a full Labor Day for Harris, who also visited Detroit.
Oh, it's good to be in the House of Labor.
And was flanked by some of the nation's top union leaders.
Everywhere I go, I tell people, look, you may not be a union member. You better thank a union member for the 5-day work week. You better thank a union member for sick leave.
While most major unions are backing Harris, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters is still holding out. Its president, Sean O'Brien, who spoke at the Republican National Convention, says they won't choose who to endorse until Harris meets with his members.
You don't hire someone unless you give them an interview. And, this is our opportunity to ask her about Teamster-specific issues and also labor issues. So until we have that meeting, obviously we will wait to make that determination.
New polls give Harris a slight edge, but no sign of a major bump after her convention. Today, she and her team warned supporters about getting too complacent.
Let's know, like labor always does, we are out here running like we are the underdog in this race.
As for her running mate Tim Walz, a scary moment for the Minnesota governor while campaigning in Milwaukee today. Vehicles in his campaign motorcade crashed into each other, injuring some staffers and reporters. The governor was okay.
I'm relieved to say that with a few minor injuries, everybody's going to be okay. So, thank you.
Notably not out on the campaign trail today, former President Donald Trump, but he is set to visit Nevada, North Carolina, and Wisconsin later this week. Harris is scheduled to go to New Hampshire before spending several days preparing for her debate next week with Trump. Nancy?
Ed O'Keefe in Pittsburgh tonight, thank you so much. 4 train passengers are dead and a suspect is under arrest after a mass shooting that spanned 2 train cars in a Chicago suburb. We get details now from CBS's Tara Molina.
An early morning nightmare on a train just outside Chicago.
You got multiple shell casings by this factory.
4 passengers found shot, 3 dead on the local Blue Line train, another who died at a nearby hospital. The shooting appears to be random. Police say there was no known motive.
It's a horrible situation. It's definitely something that you don't want to wake up to. It's a Monday morning on a holiday.
The Blue Line originates at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. The shooting happened as the train was pulling into the suburban community of Forest Park. The Chicago Transit Authority called it a heinous and egregious act of violence. Police have not released names or ages of the victims. Investigators say surveillance video led them to arrest a suspect who was on a different train. Police recovered a weapon, and they tell us those victims may have been sleeping when they were shot. There is surveillance video of this incident, and those who have seen it tell me it is both shocking and hard to watch. Nancy?
I can imagine. Tara Molina in Forest Park, Illinois, thank you so much. A $13 million plane belonging to Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is in Florida and in the custody of U.S. authorities who seized it today in the Dominican Republic. The Justice Department says the plane, described as Maduro's version of Air Force One, was illegally purchased and smuggled out of the U.S. in violation of sanctions and export rules. America and its allies are not recognizing Maduro as the winner of July's presidential election amid overwhelming evidence that he lost. Tens of millions of Americans are hitting the roads and airports today as the long Labor Day weekend comes to an end. Long lines and bumper-to-bumper traffic were expected, but bad weather and a labor strike are adding to the travel woes. CBS's Errol Barnett reports.
A radar issue this evening forced the FAA to slow flights into Newark Airport, setting off the worst airport delays nationwide. And Dallas-Fort Worth Airport could be next as stormy weather moves in. On the road to New York's LaGuardia Airport, leaving early was a winning play for tennis pro Mackenzie McDonald, returning to Orlando after playing in the U.S. Open. Labor Day and this weekend can be a busy time to travel. Are you worried about that?
Actually, it's been easier. Getting out of Manhattan was a lot easier this morning. I was actually very lucky.
But there were some unlucky hotel guests Sunday when approximately 10,000 hotel workers walked off the job at 25 hotels across the country, including Marriott, Hyatt, and Hilton properties in 9 cities, stretching from Honolulu to Boston. Members of the Unite Here union, representing hospitality workers, are seeking higher wages and a reversal of pandemic-era job cuts. Brianna Canencia works 2 jobs to make ends meet.
I won't have to get 3 hours of sleep. So that's how important it is.
The union expects the strike to last up to 3 days, hitting when the busy summer travel season comes to an end. Now, Hyatt and Hilton say they look forward to continuing talks with the union. Marriott did not respond to CBS's request for comment. Meantime, here at LaGuardia Airport in New York, there was a brief FAA ground stoppage due to a disabled aircraft. Nancy, that will only add to ongoing delays nationwide.
Errol Barnett at LaGuardia, thank you. For more on the rain and flooding risk in Texas and the big temperature changes coming on both coasts, let's bring in CBS Miami's chief meteorologist, Ivan Cabrera. Good evening, Ivan.
Nancy, good to see you, and we are back to work. It's cool tomorrow. Some of us will be dealing with September weather, particularly across the Northeast, with some cool overnight lows and high temperatures in the 70s. But take a look at the map here. Folks in Denver are wondering where fall is, or at least September. We're going backward. It's going to feel like August with temperatures well into the 90s. Places like Albuquerque approaching 90 degrees. But yeah, the focus in Texas is a stalled frontal boundary. You see all the green there? That is going to be a big problem for us over the next few days. In fact, upwards of half a foot of rainfall is possible down into Texas. Some areas picking up as much as 9 inches, and that's just through Wednesday with that stalled front. As we check into the tropics, we have one area that we're monitoring here across the Lesser Antilles. That's going to move over the Caribbean over the next few days. National Hurricane Center has this at a medium potential for development, perhaps going into Central America as a tropical depression. But Nancy, I have to tell you, we're approaching the peak of hurricane season in about a week, and so far things are quiet, although that is likely to change as we get later into September and October.
Ivan Cabrera in Miami, thanks so much. NASA solves a space mystery. That's next. NASA has identified the source of a strange pulsating noise coming from a speaker in Boeing's troubled Starliner spacecraft, which has been docked at the International Space Station since June. NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore radioed Mission Control about the bizarre sound.
Yeah, I'll do it one more time, and I'll let y'all scratch your heads and see if you can figure out what's going on. Here we go.
NASA says the noise turned out to be feedback from the communication system. Starliner is expected to return to Earth with no astronauts on board later this week. Eye on America is next with one city's effort to fix the world's plastic waste problem. Stick around. About 48 million tons of plastic waste are generated in the U.S. each year, and very little of it is ever recycled. But the city of Houston says it has an innovative new program that can recycle any type of plastic, calling it a model for the nation. In tonight's Eye on America, Ben Tracy teams up with Inside Climate News to look at the problems the program has already encountered and the deep pockets behind it.
This was tomatoes.
When Brandy Deason bags up her plastic recycling,
I'm waiting for the tracker now to come up.
She tosses in a tracking device at the end.
You're like a plastic spy.
Yeah, I feel a little bit like it, yeah.
She was skeptical of Houston's new recycling program that claims it can recycle any kind of plastic. The tracker showed her bags ended up at this storage site, not a recycling center.
Do you think the average person in Houston dropping off the recycling thinks it ends up here?
No, I think that they've gotten the idea that it's being taken care of and being recycled.
Instead, we saw piles of plastic waste stacked several feet high. The city says it's collected 250 tons of plastic since the end of 2022, and almost none of it has been recycled yet.
How big is this? So it's about 9 football fields, 550,000 square feet.
The plastic is supposed to come to this Houston warehouse, where a long-delayed sorting facility has yet to be built. Ryan Tebbets manages the project for a company called Cyclix.
We need a huge supply of plastics to get ready for startup here, and we want to start that now in order to get ahead of it. The honest thing is it's not being recycled yet. It will be recycled.
Plastic is made from oil and gas and comes in thousands of chemically distinct varieties that cannot be mixed together. That's why less than 10% gets recycled. But Cyclix says it figured out a way to sort and process any kind of plastic into these pellets that can be recycled.
But you acknowledge you've never done this at scale. Correct, this is our first facility.
Cyclix is partly funded by ExxonMobil, one of the biggest plastic makers on the planet. It's trying to prove something it calls advanced recycling can help solve the planet's crisis of plastic waste, and hopes its Houston program could be a model for the nation.
The shiny metal shows the new technology that we brought in.
Ray Mastroleo manages Exxon's effort.
And advanced recycling ultimately allows us to take that wide range of plastic waste that doesn't have a home today and repurpose them. Advanced recycling is real. It's happening. We're doing it.
The process uses heat to break down plastic to its molecular level. A small amount is turned into new plastic, but much of it becomes fuel that is burned, creating planet-warming emissions. Exxon says it has processed 60 million pounds of plastic waste so far, but the industry has touted advanced recycling for decades and not yet made it work at a large scale.
America's plastic makers are investing billions of dollars.
Plastic makers are now waging a new recycling ad campaign, just as Shell Oil shelved their advanced recycling plans, calling them unfeasible. And California's Attorney General is investigating Exxon, accusing the industry of a half-century campaign of deception about recycling.
With all due respect, should we trust a company that makes money off of making and selling plastic to tell us that there is a solution to the plastic waste problem?
I mean, that's challenging the integrity of who we are, but this is just a starting point, and we are in it for the long haul.
In the meantime, all that plastic is still piling up. For Eye on America, Ben Tracy, Houston.
Teaching young musicians an important life lesson. That's next.
This portion of the CBS Evening News is sponsored by One-A-Day.
Finally, tonight's Heart of America with a nonprofit that marches to the beat of its own drum. That's David Frangione. He is the publisher of Modern Drummer, which has served as a go-to publication for musicians since 1977. He's also the owner of some of the most iconic drum kits in rock and roll history. After years of collecting, he decided his kits could help inspire others. So he started the Frangione Foundation, which has one key message.
Follow your passion. Don't ever give up. The idea that you have is the impetus to put into action from which you will help change the world.
The Frangione Foundation and the young artists of tomorrow are tonight's Heart of America. And that's tonight's CBS Evening News. For Norah O'Donnell, I'm Nancy Cordes. Good night.